Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hey, it's Jen. Welcome back to the Bible for Busy People, and happy Earth Day. What a gift nature is to us. We are meant to steward it well, and I pray that we continue to prioritize our care of the world God gave us while we're here. Today we're talking about herbs in the Bible, which come up a surprising number of times, and they're used in various ways: culinary, medicinal, ceremonial, and symbolic. Bitter herbs are mentioned in the directions for observing the Passover, both in Exodus 12 and again in Numbers 9 when directions are given for those who are unclean during the Passover. BibleTraining.org says that these were probably not actual herbs, but rather greens like chicory, endive, sorrel, dandelion, and lettuce. They formed a probably bitter-tasting salad that could have been prepared quickly. Symbolically, they were to remind the Israelites of the bitterness of the slavery that they left behind in Egypt. Even if you wouldn't be opposed to a light salad, the point is to eat something that tastes unpleasant. The bitter herbs were eaten alongside roasted lamb, which was a sacrifice to avoid the death that was to come through Egypt to all firstborns, and unleavened bread that the Israelites had to quickly prepare before they left Egypt. These traditions carry on in Passover meals today. Lamentations 3, verses 13 to 15 refers to bitter herbs in talking about God's judgment. And then there are more bitter herbs in Isaiah 28. In verse 23, it says, "Listen and hear my voice. Pay attention and hear what I say. When a farmer plows for planting, does he plow continually? Does he keep on breaking up and working the soil? When he has leveled the surface, does he not sow caraway and scatter cumin? Does he not plant wheat in its place, barley in its plot, and spelt in its field? His God instructs him and teaches him the right way. Caraway is not threshed with a sledge, nor is the wheel of a cart rolled over cumin. Caraway is beaten out with a rod, and cumin with a stick. Grain must be ground to make bread, so one does not go on threshing it forever. The wheels of a threshing cart may be rolled over it, but one does not use horses to grind grain. All this also comes from the Lord Almighty, whose plan is wonderful, whose wisdom is magnificent." I had to look this up because I couldn't understand what the passage was saying. I don't know all the technical terms about threshing and sowing and all of these things. But the commentary described it so well, and it felt significant to share. Bible Hub explains that the farmer doesn't cultivate each plant the same way. He treats each plant differently according to what it needs, shaking out the seeds of caraway or using a rod to match the texture of the cumin. God does the same with us, not disciplining us in a one-size-fits-all kind of way, but rather meeting our needs, cultivating our character, and bringing intentional discipline where needed. God is a master planter, gardener, and cultivator. We can trust God to meet us where we are and not to go too light or too hard on us when it comes to shaping our hearts. The goal is fruitfulness. In Matthew 23, Jesus calls out practices of the teachers of the law and the Pharisees who are meticulous to follow the law, but their hearts don't follow. This is Matthew 23, verse 23. It says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel." Jesus here was challenging the Pharisees and teachers to meet their strict adherence to the law in tithing their herbs. One could say that was rather legalistic to meticulously measure out garden herbs, but Jesus doesn't seem to condemn it. With having a true heart of giving, being sure to practice justice, mercy, and faithfulness. It was legalistic. Both can be held together, but it's the heart of giving that God is seeking. Spices were also important in symbolism and practices of worship. In Exodus 30, God directs Moses to make sacred anointing oil from myrrh, which is actually resin from trees, cinnamon, calamus, and cassia, along with olive oil. This anointing oil was meant to appoint the priests in service to God and to show them as being separate from their community for that purpose. Further down in the same passage, God directed Moses to make incense from gum resin, onycha, I don't know if I'm saying that right, which is actually derived from mollusks in the Red Sea, galbanum, which smells like greens and balsamic, and frankincense, which is also derived from resin, though all of these are called spices. Both the anointing oil and incense were to be set apart for God. No one was to make those scents for their own personal use. The incense was to be in constant use in the tabernacle, meant to remind people that this was where they met with God. Also, incense is related to prayer in the Bible, and that scent would have been part of the worship experience of connecting with God. If you remember, we talked about greed a little while back and how the oil lamps in the temple were meant to be kept burning constantly. And in this way, it kept people from hoarding too much of it for themselves. I think it might be the same with these spices, not allowing people to hoard value or wealth for themselves, the value or wealth coming from the spices. And then finally, we see in Matthew 2, frankincense and myrrh were presented to baby Jesus, along with gold, by the Magi who arrived to worship him. These spices would have been of great value, worthy gifts to give a king. Is there anything that contains so much value for you that it feels hard to give it to God? How can you honor God with somehow handing over something that feels valuable to you and is difficult to release, even if that's only metaphorically? I'll let you think about that, and we'll talk again tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.